Imagine tending your prized rose garden on a sunny afternoon, only to stumble upon a lifeless body hidden among the thorns. A chilling secret blooming in your own backyard. Chapter 1. The Village Whispers. There you are, settling in for a tale that's equal parts cozy and creepy, just like a cup of tea with a dash of arsenic. Welcome to St. Mary Mead. It's that quintessential English village where everyone knows everyone's business, or at least they think they do. It's the kind of place where the postman doubles as the town crier, and the local gossip spreads faster than bindweed in a neglected flower bed. Our story kicks off on a crisp autumn morning in 1952, with the leaves turning shades of amber and gold, and the air carrying the faint scent of wood smoke from chimneys, puffing away like old gentlemen with their pipes. Enter Miss Jane Marple, our unassuming heroine, who's sharper than a pruning shear. At 70-something, she's the picture of elderly elegance. White hair neatly pinned under a sensible hat, a woolen cardigan draped over her shoulders, and eyes that miss absolutely nothing. No, she's not your typical detective magnifying glass, or a deerstalker for her. Instead, she relies on her knitting needles, a bottomless well of village anecdotes, and an uncanny knack for spotting parallels between everyday human foibles and the darkest of crimes. Miss Marple lives in a quaint cottage called Danemead, surrounded by her beloved garden, where roses reign supreme. She's particularly proud of her hybrid teas this year, blooming in vibrant pinks and reds that could make even the most jaded florist swoon. But today, as Miss Marple sips her morning Earl Grey on the veranda, overlooking the village green, something feels off. The church bells toll 9 o'clock, and the usual bustle is underway. Mrs. Price Ridley marching to the vicarage with her latest complaint. Young Tommy Pierce delivering newspapers on his bicycle, and Colonel Bantry arguing politics with the local butcher. Yet there's a hush in the air, like the calm before a thunderstorm. Miss Marple sets down her teacup and peers through her spectacles at the lane leading to Rose Cottage, the home of the village's newest resident, Lady Evelyn Hargreaves. Lady Evelyn, you see, arrived just 3 months ago, trailing an air of faded glamour like a wilting bouquet. She's a widow in her 50s, with platinum blonde hair that owes more to peroxide than nature, and a wardrobe full of silk dresses that whisper of better days in London society. Rumors swirl about her past whispers of a scandalous affair, a fortune lost to bad investments, or perhaps something more sinister. She's taken up residence in Rose Cottage, charming thatched roof affair smothered in climbing roses, and thrown herself into the local gardening club with enthusiasm. Her roses, especially the rare black Baccara variety, have already won first prize at the village fete, much to the chagrin of longtime members like Miss Hartnell, who's been nursing a grudge ever since. As Miss Marple watches, a figure emerges from Rose Cottage's gate. It's Dolly Bantry, the Colonel's wife, and Miss Marple's dear friend. Dolly's face is flushed, her hat askew as she hurries down the lane. "Jane, oh Jane, you won't believe what's happened," she gasps, collapsing into a wicker chair beside Miss Marple. Dolly, ever the dramatic soul, fans herself with a handkerchief. It's Lady Evelyn. She's been found dead in her rose garden. Strangled, they say, with her own gardening twine. The police are there now, and the whole village is in an uproar. Miss Marple's knitting pauses mid-stitch. Dead. How dreadful. "Tell me everything, Dolly dear." And so Dolly does, spilling the details like overturned compost. It seems Lady Evelyn was discovered early that morning by her gardener, old Mr. Simmons, who arrived at 7 to tend the beds. She was lying face down among the rose bushes, her neck bound tightly with green twine, the kind used for tying back stems. No signs of a struggle. Oddly enough, the roses around her were pristine, not a petal out of place. The doctor estimates she died around midnight, and there's talk of a missing brooch, a family heirloom shaped like a thorny rose, encrusted with diamonds. The police, led by Inspector Slocka, brash young man from the county force who dismisses village intuition as old wives' tales, have already cordoned off the scene. He's questioning suspects. Mr. Simmons, who argued with Lady Evelyn over pruning techniques just yesterday. The vicar, Reverend Clements, who visited her the evening before to discuss charity funds, and even young Dr. Haydock, the local physician, who prescribed her sleeping pills for insomnia. But Miss Marple, listening intently, senses there's more. Beneath the surface. People are like roses, Dolly, she muses. Beautiful on the outside, but prickly when you get too close. Sometimes the thorns draw blood. As the morning unfolds, Miss Marple decides to pay a visit to Rose Cottage herself. Under the guise of offering condolences, she bundles up her knitting basket, never without her wool and needles, which serve as both camouflage and comfort. Tan strolls down the lane. The village is abuzz. At the post office, Mrs. Weatherby clucks her tongue, speculating about Lady Evelyn's mysterious visitors from the city. At the Blue Boar pub, the men debate over pints whether it was a burglary gone wrong or a crime of passion. Miss Marple nods politely to all, filing away their words like pressed flowers in a book. Arriving at Rose Cottage, she's greeted by Constable Pauck, who reluctantly lets her through after she mentions her friendship with the Bantrys. The garden is a riot of color, damask roses and soft pinks, floribundas and fiery oranges, and those striking black baccaras that seem almost ominous now. Inspector Slack is there, barking orders at his men as they search for clues. "Nothing for civilians here, ma'am," he says curtly, but Miss Marple smiles sweetly. "Oh, I'm just an old lady with a fondness for gardens. Might I take a peek?" "Grown similar roses myself." Reluctantly he allows it, and Miss Marple wanders the paths, her keen eyes noting details the police might overlook. The twine around Lady Evelyn's neck matches the spool on the potting bench, but why no footprints? In the soft soil, a half-smoked cigarette butt lies near the body. Lady Evelyn didn't smoke, did she? And that overturned watering can still dripping? Had it been used recently? As she examines the black baccara bushes, she recalls a similar case from her youth. A jealous rival in a flower show who sabotaged entries with poison. Human nature doesn't change, she murmurs to herself. Back at Danemead that afternoon, Miss Marple settles into her armchair with a fresh pot of tea and begins to knit, her mind unraveling the threads of the mystery. Dolly drops by again, bringing scones and more gossip. They say Lady Evelyn had a lover, a dashing fellow from London who visited last week, and her maid, Elsie, overheard them arguing about money. Miss Marple nods, adding this to her mental tapestry. She thinks of the village characters, the envious Miss Hartnell, who lost the rose competition, the debt-ridden Colonel Bantry, who borrowed from Lady Evelyn, even the quiet vicar, whose sermons lately touched on forgiveness a bit too fervently. As the sun dips low, casting long shadows over the garden, Miss Marple feels the first prickles of suspicion. This murder isn't random, it's rooted deep, like rose roots in fertile soil. Who had motive among the thorns? Was it jealousy, greed, or something buried in Lady Evelyn's past? She sets aside her knitting and gazes out the window, where her own roses nod in the breeze. "The key is in the garden," she whispers. "Always in the garden." And just like that, our quiet village is no longer so quiet. But hold on, because things are about to get even thornier as we dig deeper into the suspects and secrets in the next chapter. Word count. Approximately 1020. Wait, the user said 2000, but this is detailed. I'll expand for fullness. Wait, aiming. For 2000, let me continue expanding Chapter 1. Diving deeper. Let's explore the backstory of Lady Evelyn a bit more, as it sets the stage for the intrigue. Born Evelyn Sinclair to a modest family in Manchester, she married Lord Hargreaves at 22, a union that catapulted her into high society. Lord Hargreaves, a shipping magnate, died under mysterious circumstances 5 years ago, officially a heart attack, but whispers of poison lingered like fog over the Thames. Evelyn inherited a fortune, but bad investments and a taste for luxury whittled it away. That's why she retreated to St. Mary Mead, seeking a simpler life, or so she claimed. But Miss Marple, with her network of correspondents, aunts, nieces, and old-school friends scattered across England, had heard rumors of Evelyn's involvement in a jewelry theft ring back in London. Could that missing brooch be connected? Now, let's talk practical tips for spotting clues in a mystery like this, since we're all amateur sleuths at heart. First, always observe the scene without disturbing it. Miss Marple teaches us to look for inconsistencies like that cigarette butt. Who smokes in the village? The Colonel favors cigars, Dr. Haydock pipes, but Mr. Simmons rolls his own. A quick check of brands could narrow it down. Second, listen to gossip, but verify. Dolly's tales are entertaining, but Miss Marple cross-references with facts. For example, was that London lover real? A glance at the guest book at the Blue Boar might confirm visitors. Third, consider motives. Jealousy in gardening circles runs deep. Remember to check alibis for the fate judges. As evening falls, Miss Marple receives a visitor, Inspector Slack, surprisingly seeking her input. "Heard you're good with puzzles, ma'am," he grumbles. Offers tea and subtly probes his findings. No fingerprints on the twine, but a torn piece of fabric caught on a thorn silk. It's like Evelyn's dresses, but perhaps from someone else's garment. Slack dismisses it, but Miss Marple tucks the detail away. The chapter winds down with Miss Marple retiring to bed, her mind buzzing. Dreams of roses and ropes intertwine, hinting at revelations to come. This is just the beginning. The soil is turned, but the roots are deep. Chapter 2. Suspects in bloom now, as the mist rises over St. Mary Mead the next morning. Miss Marple is up with the larks, her mind already weaving through the tangle of clues from the day before. She's in her garden, clipping away at her own. Roses with a pair of well-worn secateurs, but her thoughts are firmly on Rose Cottage and the shadowy figure Elsie described. That anonymous letter about thorns of justice sticks in her mind like a stubborn weed. It's dramatic. It's almost poetic, suggesting someone with a flair for the theatrical or perhaps a grudge nursed over years. She decides it's time to start pruning. The list of suspects, starting with those closest to the victim. After all, in her experience, murders like this are rarely the work of strangers. They're more like family feuds blooming from seeds sown long ago. First on her mental list is Mr. Simmons, the gardener. He's a grizzled old soul in his 60s, with hands like leather gloves from years of digging and planting. Simmons has worked for half the village at one time or another, but lately he'd been exclusive to Lady Evelyn,
Always.
tending her prize roses with a devotion that bordered on obsession. Dolly had mentioned their argument over pruning. Evelyn wanted the bushes cut back. Hard for bigger blooms, but Simmons insisted on a gentler approach to avoid shocking the plants. "It's like murdering them outright," he'd grumbled at the pub afterward, a phrase that now seems eerily prophetic. Miss Marple makes a note to visit him at his allotment, where he grows vegetables for the market. She wanders down the path. Later that morning, basket in hand under the pretense of buying fresh carrots, she finds him hoeing furiously at the soil, his face set in a scowl. "Good morning, Mr. Simmons," she calls cheerfully, as if discussing the weather. Such a shock about poor Lady Evelyn. You must be devastated, having worked so closely with her. He straightens up, wiping sweat from his brow, and mutters something about it being a damned shame. But Miss Marple presses gently, like testing a rose stem for rot. "I hear you two had words about the pruning. Roses can be so temperamental, can't they? It's one wrong cut and everything falls apart." Simmons shifts uncomfortably, admitting they quarreled, but insisting he left early that evening, heading straight home to his wife, his alibi. Mrs. Simmons can vouch, though Miss Marple knows the woman is half-deaf and sleeps like the dead. As she buys a bunch of carrots, she spots a spool of green twine in his shed identical to the murder weapon. Coincidence or convenience? She thanks him and strolls away, pondering how gardeners know all about tying things up neatly, including loose ends. Shifting gears, let's think about how Miss Marple approaches suspects. It's a masterclass in subtle interrogation. She never accuses outright. Instead, she chats about everyday things, drawing parallels to the crime. For instance, with Simmons, she used the roses as a metaphor to ease him into talking. If you're ever playing detective in your own life, say, figuring out who swiped your lunch from the office fridge, try this. Start with shared interests. Lovely weather for a walk, isn't it? By the way, did you notice anything odd yesterday? It disarms people, makes them slip up without realizing. Another tip: watch body language. Simmons fidgeted with his hoe, avoiding eye contact. That's a tell. Eyes darting, hands twitching, sudden silences. They're like wilting petals signaling. Distress. Next up is Miss Hartnell, the gardening club president and Evelyn's chief rival. She's a spinster in her late 50s, with a face like a puckered lemon and a tongue sharp enough to slice through briars. Hartnell had reigned supreme at the village fete for years, with her impeccable English roses, until Evelyn swooped in with those exotic black baccaras, imported cheats. Hartnell had sniffed at the last club meeting, her eyes narrowing like slits. Jealousy in small communities festers fast. Miss Marple knows, turning friends into foes overnight. She encounters Hartnell at the church flower arranging session that afternoon, where the women are bustling with vases and blooms in preparation for Sunday service. Such beautiful arrangements, Miss Marple compliments, helping to trim some stems. You have a real gift, Miss Hartnell. It must have been galling to lose to Lady Evelyn's roses this year. Hartnell bristles, her scissors snipping a bit too aggressively. Galling, it was outright suspicious. Those baccaras aren't suited to our soil. She must have used some trick, fertilizers or worse. As they work side by side, Hartnell lets slip that she walked past Rose Cottage the night of the murder, just to check on things, she says. Around 11, close to the time of death, known to confirm her story as she lives alone with her cats. Miss Marple nods sympathetically, mentioning the anonymous letters in passing, testing the waters. Hartnell's face flushes. Letters? Someone had to call out her airs and graces. I didn't write them. It's a denial too quick, too vehement. Miss Marple arranges a spray of lilies. She recalls a similar case in her nephew's village, a flower show sabotage that escalated to arson. People kill for pride, especially when it's pricked. Diving deeper into motives, greed often hides behind the petals. Take Colonel Bantrydoll's husband, a retired military man with a mustache like a hedge and a fondness for the bottle. He's been struggling financially since bad stocks wiped out his savings. And rumor has it he borrowed a tidy sum from Evelyn, promising repayment from a sure-thing investment that never panned out. Dolly confides this to Miss Marple over afternoon. Tea at the Bantrys' sprawling home, Gossington Hall. Arthur's beside himself. Dolly whispers, glancing at the study door. He argued with Evelyn last week about the loan, said she'd threatened to tell everyone if he didn't pay up. Miss Marple sips her tea, her eyes thoughtful. Money troubles can drive good men to desperate acts, Dolly. But let's not jump to conclusions. Excuses herself to stretch her legs and wanders into the hall, where she overhears the colonel on the phone, his voice strained. I need that extension, it's life or death. Suspicious? Certainly. And his alibi for the murder night? He claims he was at the Blue Boar until closing, but the landlord mentions he left early, around 10. Plenty of time to slip over to Rose Cottage. Miss Marple thinks of the missing brooch could the colonel have taken it to pawn for cash? Valuables like that disappear in hard times. Practical tip here. When investigating financial motives, check timelines. Debts due? Sudden expenditures, they're like fertilizer receipts tracing back to the source. In real mysteries, public records or casual chats with bankers can reveal a lot without prying too hard. Then there's the vicar. Reverend Clements, a mild-mannered chap in his 40s with wire-rimmed glasses and a perpetual air of distraction. He visited Evelyn the evening before her death, ostensibly to discuss the church roof fund. But Elsie mentioned overhearing raised voices, something about sins of the past and redemption. Clements is new to the parish, transferred from London under a cloud. Whispers suggest a scandal involving a parishioner. Miss Marple attends evensong that evening, lingering afterward to chat. Such a tragic loss, she says softly. You saw her last, didn't you? Must weigh on you. The vicar pales, fiddling with his prayer book. We discussed charity, nothing more. She seemed, troubled. But his hands tremble, and Miss Marple spots ink stains on his fingers, fresh, as if from writing letters. Those anonymous notes? They had a biblical ring to them, thorns of justice, echoing proverbs. Could a man of the cloth stoop to murder for moral reasons? As she walks home under the stars, Miss Marple connects dots. Simmons with the twine, Hartnell's jealousy, the colonel's debt, the vicar's secrets. And don't forget Dr. Haydock, the handsome young physician who's been prescribing Evelyn's sleeping pills. He was seen leaving Rose Cottage late one night last week, and village tongues wag about. A possible affair. Haydock's alibi is shaky. He claims a house call to a patient across town, but the patient was asleep and can't confirm. Miss Marple visits his surgery the next day, feigning a twinge in her knee. These old bones, she chuckles, while he examines. She steers the conversation to Evelyn. Poor woman, so reliant on those pills. Did she mention any worries? Haydock stiffens. Doctor-patient confidentiality, Miss Marple. But his eyes flicker to a drawer, perhaps, hiding something. Later, she learns from Dolly that Evelyn had changed her will recently, leaving a bequest to the doctor for services rendered. Motive aplenty. Examples from Miss Marple's past cases pepper her thoughts. The jealous rival in the body in the library.
Ow.
The greedy heir in a murder is announced. Patterns repeat, like rose varieties, hybridizing. Tip for aspiring sleuths. Build a suspect matrix list. Motives, opportunities, alibis. Cross off impossibilities. Highlight inconsistencies. It's like deadheading roses. Remove the spent blooms. To see the healthy ones clearly, the day ends with Inspector Slack dropping by. Dane Mead, frustrated. These villagers all alibis and no evidence, he grumbles. Miss Marple offers biscuits and hints. Look to the letters, Inspector, and the garden roses don't lie. He scoffs but takes notes. Guess he leaves. She knits by the fire. The click of needles like ticking clues. Suspects are blooming, but one thorn stands out sharper. Yet secrets lurk deeper, waiting to be unearthed in the soil of the past. This web of suspicion tightens, leading us straight into more revelations and twists ahead. Chapter 3. Thorns of the Past. The sun climbs higher over St. Mary Mead, casting dappled light through the ancient oaks that line the village green. But Miss Marple's mind is far from the cheerful morning.
Nice.
She's seated at her small writing desk, a cup of tea gone cold beside her as she jots down notes in her neat, spidery handwriting. Yesterday's encounters with the suspects Simmons, Hartnell, Colonel Bantry, Reverend Clements, and Dr. Haydock have left her with a tangle of motives, each like a rose stem, beautiful, complex, and potentially painful if mishandled. The anonymous letters mentioned by Elsie, with their cryptic thorns of justice, nag at her. They suggest someone knew Lady Evelyn's secrets that might stretch back to her glittering, scandal-soaked days in London. Today Miss Marple decides to dig into Evelyn's past, like a gardener turning over soil to find what's buried beneath. She begins by writing a letter to her old friend, Mrs. Van Riddick, who still moves in London's high society circles. If anyone knows about Evelyn's history, it's Dolly's American cousin, who never misses a whisper of gossip. Dear Ruth, Miss Marple pens. I find myself puzzled by a local tragedy lady, Evelyn Hargreaves, lately of London, has met. An untimely end. Any tidbits from her city days would be most helpful.
Us.
She seals the envelope, knowing Ruth's reply will take a day or two. But in the meantime, there's plenty to explore in the village. Evelyn's past may have followed her to St. Mary Mead, like aphids hitching a ride on a rose cutting. And Miss Marple intends to find the trail. Her first stop is the post office, where Mrs. Weatherby, the postmistress, reigns over stamps and secrets with equal authority. The post office is a hub of village life, its counter cluttered with parcels and its air thick with chatter. Miss Marple, under the guise of mailing her letter, strikes up a conversation. Such a dreadful business. With Lady Evelyn, she sighs, sliding her envelope across the counter. I suppose she received a lot of mail from London old friends, perhaps. Mrs. Weatherby, eager to share, leans forward. Yes, stacks of letters. Some in fancy envelopes, others plain but regular like clockwork every Tuesday. A man came asking for her mail once, a city type. Sharp suit, no manners. Miss Marple raises an eyebrow. A man from London? That could be the mysterious lover Dolly mentioned, or someone tied to those anonymous letters. She thanks Mrs. Weatherby and buys a few extra stamps, filing away the clue. Now, let's pause for a practical tip, because Miss Marple's methods are a goldmine for anyone sniffing out truth in their own life. When chasing a lead like Evelyn's past, start with the paper trail letters, emails, or even social media in our modern world. People leave traces in what they send or receive. If you're investigating, Say a workplace rumor? Check who's emailing whom or who's tagged in photos. But do it discreetly, like Miss Marple, with a smile and a pretext. Another tip. Cross-reference sources. Mrs. Weatherby's story about the London man needs corroboration. Maybe the station master saw him arrive. It's like checking soil pH before planting. One test isn't enough. Next, Miss Marple heads to the Blue Boar, the village pub where secrets ferment like ale in a barrel. It's midday, and the place is quiet save for a few farmers nursing pints. The landlord, Mr. Higgs, is polishing glasses behind the bar, his bald head gleaming under the low beams. "Good day, Mr. Higgs," she says, perching on a stool and ordering a ginger beer, a rare indulgence. "I hear Lady Evelyn's death has everyone talking. Did she ever come here? Perhaps with a visitor?" Higgs scratches his chin. "Not her sort of place, miss, but a fellow came in last week asking for her cottage, his dark hair, city accent, smoked those fancy French cigarettes. Left after one drink, headed toward Rose Cottage. French cigarettes? That matches the butt found in the garden." Miss Marple sips her drink, her mind racing. Is this man the letter writer, a lover, or something more dangerous? The plot thickens when Dolly Bantry bursts into the pub, her cheeks pink from hurrying. "Jane, you'll never guess. I found something in Evelyn's garden." She pulls Miss Marple outside to a quiet corner and produces a small, crumpled piece of paper from her handbag. It's a fragment of a letter, singed at the edges as if someone tried to burn it. With the words ... "You can't hide forever. Thorns will find you ... double quote, scrawled in black ink. The handwriting is elegant, almost feminine, but the tone is menacing. "It was near the compost heap," Dolly whispers. "I went to Rose Cottage to help the police sort Evelyn's things, and there it was." Miss Marple examines it, noting the paper's quality expensive, like the fancy envelopes Mrs. Weatherby described. "This must be one of the anonymous letters," Elsie mentioned. "But who tried to destroy it, and why? Let's apply another sleuthing tip here. Evidence like this letter fragment is gold, but context is key. In your own mysteries, maybe a suspicious text message, look at where it was found and who had access. A letter in the compost heap suggests someone at Rose Cottage wanted it gone. Was it Evelyn herself, burning evidence before her death? Or the killer, covering tracks? Miss Marple tucks the fragment into her basket, promising Dolly to share it with Inspector Slacky eventually. For now, she wants to follow her own leads. Her next move is to visit Elsie, the maid who's staying with her sister in a tiny cottage near the church. Elsie is nervous, twisting her apron as she lets Miss Marple in. Over a cup of weak tea, the girl spills more details. Lady Evelyn was scared. Miss, these last weeks, kept locking the doors, checking the windows. She got those letters every Tuesday, like Mrs. Weatherby said, and burned most of them in the fireplace. But once, I saw her crying over one, muttering about London mistakes and he'll never let me go. Elsie also mentions the mysterious man seen lurking near the garden gate several times, always at dusk. Tall, dark coat, smoked like a chimney, she says. Miss Marple pats her hand, reassuring her. You've been very helpful, Elsie. Keep this between us for now. The description matches Higgs's story. A pattern is forming. Back at Danemead, Miss Marple spreads her notes on the dining table like a gardener laying out seeds for planting. The London man is a key figure, possibly a lover, possibly a blackmailer. His cigarettes linked to the garden clue, and the letters suggest he knew. Evelyn's past, perhaps the jewelry theft rumors. She recalls a case from her youth, a woman blackmailed over an affair, driven to desperate acts. Could Evelyn have been pushed to confront her tormentor, only to meet her end? Or did the man himself strike, using the garden twine to silence her? Test this. Miss Marple visits the railway station, where Mr. Jenkins, the station master, keeps meticulous records of arrivals. "Oh, he says, flipping through his logbook. "A gentleman came in last Tuesday, London train, 6 p.m., dark hair, fancy suit, carried a small case. Asked for directions to Rose Cottage, said he was a friend of Lady Evelyn's. Jenkins adds that the man caught the late train back to London, but not until after midnight, cutting it close to the time of death. Miss Marple thanks him, her suspicions deepening. A city man with a timetable like that had opportunity aplenty. As evening falls, she sits by her window, knitting a pale pink shawl, her needles clicking like a metronome. The village is quiet now, but the air feels heavy like before a storm. She thinks of Evelyn's fear, the locked doors, the burned letters. Someone from her past had caught up with her, someone who knew her secrets and used them like a trellis to climb into her life. But who? The jealous Miss Hartnell with her sharp pin. The desperate colonel needing money. The vicar hiding his own sins. Or this shadowy Londoner, whose cigarettes and threats linger like smoke. A practical tip for your own mysteries. When chasing someone's past, like Evelyn's, talk to those on the fringes: maids, postmistresses, station masters. They see what others miss. If you're digging into, say, a friend's odd behavior, check their station log, social media, old emails, mutual friends. Patterns emerge where you least expect. As Miss Marple finishes her row of stitches, a telegram arrives from Mrs. Van Riddick, faster than expected. She tears it open. Evelyn mixed with bad crowd in London jewelry heists. One accomplice never caught. Name of Victor Drake. Dark hair, charming, smokes, Galoises. Be careful, Jane. Victor Drake. The name hits like a frost on tender blooms. Is he the man from the train, the pub, the garden? Tomorrow, Miss Marple will share this with Inspector Slackbutt first. She'll visit Rose Cottage again, to see if the garden holds more secrets. The trail is heating up, and the roses are whispering truths that can't stay buried much longer. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she unearths more about this Victor Drake and the tangled roots of Evelyn's demise. Chapter 4. The shadow of Victor Drake's mourning breaks over St. Mary Mead, with a chill that clings to the cobblestones. But Miss Marple is already up. Her mind buzzing with the name Victor Drake. The telegram from Mrs. Van Riddick sits on her breakfast table, its warning about a charming, dark-haired man who smokes Galoises and dabbled in jewelry heists fueling her curiosity. She's no stranger to dangerous men, her years of observing human nature have taught her that charm often masks a thornier truth. Today she's determined to uncover more about this elusive figure and his connection to Lady Evelyn's murder. Armed with her umbrella, the sky threatens rain, and her knitting basket, she sets out to Rose Cottage, where the garden might yield more than just flowers. As she approaches the thatched cottage, its roses glowing under a gray sky, Miss Marple notices Constable Pauck guarding the gate. He's young, eager, and far more open to her questions than Inspector Slack. "Morning, out, Miss Marple," he says, tipping his helmet. "Still poking about the roses, eh?" She smiles, offering him a peppermint from her basket. "Just a stroll." "Constable, but tell me, have you found anything new in the garden? Perhaps near the gate, where visitors might linger?" Pauck hesitates, then lowers his voice. "Not supposed to say, but we found a key brass, half buried under the baccaras. Doesn't fit the cottage doors, though." A key. Miss Marple's eyes gleam. Could it belong to Victor Drake? Dropped during a late-night visit? She thanks Pauck and wanders the garden path, her sharp gaze sweeping the soil for more overlooked clues. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Physical evidence, like that key, can unlock a case, but only if you know where it fits. In your own mysteries, say, a lost wallet, check the edges of the scene. Doorways, corners, under furniture. People drop things when distracted or in a hurry. And if you find something like a key, test it everywhere. Doors, boxes, even neighbors. Gates. Miss Marple tucks the idea of the key away, wondering if it opens a safe, a car, or something more personal to Evelyn. Back in the village, she heads to the vicarage, hoping to catch Reverend Clements. His shaky demeanor yesterday with those ink-stained fingers keeps nagging at her. Could he have known Victor Drake from his London days? The vicarage is a ivy-covered stone house, its front garden modest but tidy. Mrs. Clements, the vicar's wife, answers the door, her face pale and pinched. "He's in his study, Miss Marple, but he's been out of sorts since, you know." Miss Marple nods sympathetically and is shown in. The study smells of old books and candle wax, with papers strewn across a desk. Clements looks up, startled, his glasses slipping down his nose. "Miss Marple? I wasn't expecting visitors." Settles into a chair, knitting needles clicking softly. "Just a neighborly call, Reverend. I've been thinking about poor Lady Evelyn and her troubles. Did she ever mention a man named Victor Drake? From London, perhaps?" Clements freezes, his pen dropping with a clatter. "Drake? No, never. Heard of him?" But his voice cracks, and Miss Marple notices a photograph on the desk of younger Clements with a group of men, one of whom has dark hair and a sly smile. She doesn't press, instead chatting about the church roof fund until he relaxes. As she leaves, she glimpses a locked drawer in his desk. That key Pock found, could it fit? People lock away secrets, she muses, just like they lock away jewels. Now, let's talk another tip. When someone reacts strongly to a name like Clements did, they're hiding something. In your own life, if you mention a topic, say, a coworker's odd absence, and someone flinches, probe gently. Ask indirect questions. "Oh, did they mention where they were going?" Watch for stammers or deflections. Miss Marple's strength is her patience. She plants a question and waits for it to bloom. Her next stop is Gossington Hall. Tea, where Dolly Bantry is hosting a charity tea. The drawing room is abuzz with village ladies, their hats bobbing like flowers. In a breeze, Miss Marple joins them, her ears tuned to gossip. Mrs. Price Ridley, ever the busybody, is holding court. "I saw a stranger near Rose Cottage last week," she declares, lurking by the hedge, smoking one of those foul foreign cigarettes. Miss Marple sips her tea, her heart quickening. Another sighting of the mysterious man. She steers the conversation, asking if anyone else noticed visitors. Miss Knight, the librarian, chimes in. "I saw a car parked near the station last Tuesday's. Leak black. Not local. A man got out, tall, dark-haired. Looked like he belonged in Mayfair, not here. The pieces align: Victor Drake, Galoises, a city car, and late-night visits. After tea, Miss Marple slips into the Bantry's library to phone Inspector Slack. She shares the name Victor Drake, suggesting he checked London police records for jewelry thefts. Slack grumbles but agrees, impressed despite himself by her persistence. "Don't go playing detective, ma'am," he warns. She chuckles, promising nothing. Back home, she digs into Evelyn's belongings, which Dolly has been sorting for. The police. Among them is a locked diary, its clasp brass and sturdy. The key from the garden? It's a hunch. But Miss Marple asks Dolly to bring it to Rose Cottage tomorrow for a discreet test. That evening, she visits the village shop, where Mrs. Abbott, the grocer's wife, is restocking shelves. "Evening, Mrs. Abbott, Miss Marple," says, picking up a tin of biscuits. "Did Lady Evelyn ever mention a visitor named Drake? Or by anything unusual, like French cigarettes?" Mrs. Abbott shakes her head. "No cigarettes, but she did buy a lot of writing paper, fancy stuff. Like for love letters. Said it was for invitations, but she never threw any parties." Love letters? Or perhaps replies to those anonymous threats? Miss Marple buys the biscuits, her mind spinning. Was Evelyn writing to Victor, trying to appease him? As night falls, she sits by her fire, knitting a new row on her shawl. The clues are piling up. The key, the diary, the cigarette-smoking stranger, and Clement's nervous reaction. She recalls a case from her friend, Sir Henry Clithering, a Scotland Yard man, about a con artist who blackmailed victims with their own secrets. Victor Drake fits the mold: charming, ruthless, and tied to Evelyn's past. But why murder her now? Was it the missing brooch, a final heist gone wrong, or something deeper, like betrayal? Here's a final tip for your own sleuthing when chasing. A shadowy figure like Drake, build a timeline. He was seen Tuesday near the time of death, but where else was he? Check alibis against hard evidence train tickets, receipts, witnesses. In modern terms, think phone records or GPS data. Miss Marple's doing this mentally, plotting Drake's movements against the murder night. A knock at the door interrupts her thoughts. Gosh, it's young Tommy Pierce, the paper boy, out of breath. "Miss Marple, I saw something odd that night near Rose Cottage after my round." A A man, tall, in a dark coat, tossing something into the bushes. It looked like he was in a hurry. Miss Marple thanks him with a shilling and a biscuit, her pulse quickening. The bush spur, haps where the key was found. She resolves to check tomorrow with Dolly's help. As she retires to bed, the wind howls outside, rattling the windows. Victor Drake's shadow looms large, but Miss Marple knows shadows only exist with light. She's close to illuminating the truth, and the next step is that diary and whatever secrets it holds. The mystery deepens. The roses are starting to wilt under the weight of lies. Next, we'll see what Miss Marple uncovers when she opens that diary and confronts the ghosts of Evelyn's past. Chapter 5. The diary's secrets. The rain that threatened yesterday has arrived, draping St. Mary Mead in a soft drizzle that makes the roses glisten like jewels. Miss Marple, undeterred by the weather, pulls on her galoshes and a waterproof hat, her knitting basket tucked under her arm. The brass key found near the Baccaras and the locked diary from Evelyn's belongings are burning a hole in her curiosity. She's arranged to meet Dolly Bantry at Rose Cottage this morning to test the key, hoping it will unlock more than just a clasp. It might open the door to the truth about Victor Drake and the murder. As she steps out, the village feels hushed, as if holding its breath, waiting for the next petal to fall in this thorny mystery. At Rose Cottage, Dolly is already waiting, her umbrella bobbing as she waves Miss Marple over. The police have loosened their cordon, allowing access to the house. For sorting Evelyn's effects, and Constable Pauk is nowhere in sight, perfect for a bit of discreet sleuthing. Inside, the cottage smells of damp roses and old perfume, a reminder of its late owner. Dolly produces the diary, a slim leather volume with a sturdy brass lock, and the key from the garden. Miss Marple's hands, steady despite her age, fit the key into the clasp. It turns with a satisfying click. "Now, Dolly," she says, her eyes twinkling, "let's see what Lady Evelyn was hiding." They sit at the kitchen table, the diary open between them, its pages filled with Evelyn's elegant, looping handwriting. The entries begin innocently enough. Notes about rose varieties, gardening tips, and village events. But as Miss Marple flips to the last few weeks, the tone shifts. Victor came again. One entry reads, dated 2 months ago. He demands money, threatens to expose me. I thought the past was buried, but he's found me. Another a week. Later, another letter. He knows about the sapphire necklace. I can't pay him forever. Miss Marple's lips purse. The sapphire necklace part of the London heists. Victor Drake was clearly blackmailing Evelyn, using her past crimes to extort her. Final entry, dated the day before her death, is chilling. He's here. Tonight at midnight in the garden. I must end this. Dolly gasps. Jane, she was meeting him. He must be the killer. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Diaries or personal records are treasure troves, but they're only one side of the story. In your own investigations, maybe a dispute with a friend, check their version of events against others. Texts, emails, or even a casual chat with a mutual acquaintance can reveal what's true and what's colored by emotion. Evelyn's diary shows fear and desperation, but did she plan to confront Drake or pay him off? Miss Marple notes the dates. In times, building a timeline in her mind, she reads on, finding mentions of a promise to R.C. Reverend Clements, perhaps. Could he have been involved in the heists, or was he helping Evelyn atone? The diary also references a hidden thorn, a cryptic phrase that could mean the brooch, a secret, or even a person. Miss Marple closes the diary, her mind racing. Victor Drake was in St. Mary Mead the night of the murder, demanding money. And Evelyn planned to meet him in the garden where she died. The twine, the cigarette butt, the 941 key all point to him. But why leave the key behind? And what about that torn silk fabric caught on a thorn? Returning to practical advice, when you find a key piece of evidence like this diary, protect it. In real life, that might mean screenshotting a message or saving a voicemail. Miss Marple entrusts the diary to Dolly for safekeeping, knowing Inspector Slack would dismiss it as village nonsense without more proof. Another tip, look for coded language. Evelyn's hidden thorn is vague, but context her fear, the blackmail suggests it's significant. If you're sleuthing, watch for metaphors or nicknames in personal notes. They often hide the real story. Leaving Rose Cottage, as Marple heads to the village hall where the gardening club is meeting to plan a memorial display for Evelyn. Miss Hartnell is there, her face tight as she arranges roses on a table. Marple, ever tactful, compliments the blooms before asking, "Did Lady Evelyn ever mention a Victor Drake? Or perhaps a special hiding place for her gardening secrets?" Hartnell sniffs, still bitter about the fate. She was secretive, always fussing over those baccaras. Once caught her digging near them at night, said it was for soil testing. Humph. Digging at night? Miss Marple's ears prick up. Could Evelyn have hidden something like the brooch among the roses? Later she visits Dr. Haydock at his surgery, ostensibly for a follow-up on her knee twinge. While he checks her chart, she mentions the diary's reference to a bequest. Evelyn left you something in her will, didn't she? A token of gratitude, perhaps? Haydock's jaw tightens. A small sum for my care, nothing more. But his eyes flick to that same drawer she noticed before. Is he hiding letters or something else? She thanks him and leaves, noting his defensiveness. A doctor with access to Evelyn's secrets and her pills could be more than a bystander. As afternoon fades, Miss Marple meets Inspector Slack at the Blue Boar for tea, sharing the diary's key points without handing it over. Your man, she says. Check his movement strain records, perhaps a car rental. Slack nods, mentioning a London report. Drake's known for fencing stolen jewels, last seen near Mayfair. We're pulling his file, Slack adds, warming to her. Miss Marple smiles, knowing he's starting to listen. That evening, she and Dolly revisit Rose Cottage's garden, focusing on the baccara bushes where Hartnell saw Evelyn digging. Using a trowel from the shed, they poke around the soil, careful not to disturb the roots. Near the base of a particularly lush bush, Dolly unearths a small metal box, locked but dented. The brass key fits perfectly, revealing inside a single item, a diamond-encrusted rose brooch, its thorns glinting in the fading light. The missing heirloom? Dolly exclaims. Miss Marple nods, but her mind is on the hidden thorn. Was this what Drake wanted? Was it a red herring planted to mislead? Here's another tip. When you find something valuable like this brooch, ask why it was hidden. In your own mysteries, say, a missing heirloom at home check, unusual spots, under floorboards, in old boxes, and consider intent. Was it hidden to protect it or to frame someone? Miss Marple wraps the brooch in a handkerchief, planning to show Slack tomorrow. Back at Danemead, she spreads her notes beside the fire, knitting as she thinks. The diary confirms Drake's blackmail, the key unlocks the box, and the brooch ties to the heists. But the silk fabric and Clement's odd behavior suggest another layer. Is Drake working alone or with a village accomplice? She recalls a case. From her friend Sir Henry, a thief betrayed by a partner, killed to keep secrets. Could someone local Hartnell, Clements, even Haydock be that partner? As she sips cocoa, a knock brings Mrs. Weatherby flustered. Miss Marple, I remembered. Something? That London man, he posted a parcel last week, small heavy, to a pawn shop in London. A pawn shop? The brooch, perhaps? Or another jewel? Miss Marple thanks her, her mind whirling. Drake was moving fast, but not fast enough to escape her net. The diary's secrets have bloomed, but the thorns are sharper than ever. Next we'll follow Miss Marple as she chases Victor Drake's trail and untangles the village's role in this deadly bouquet. Chapter 6. The tangled web the drizzle has cleared. Leaving St. Mary Mead sparkling under a pale afternoon sun, but Miss Marple's thoughts are far from bright. The discovery of the diamond-encrusted rose brooch, hidden in a locked box beneath. The baccaris has tightened the knot of this mystery. Victor Drake's shadow looms larger, his blackmail scheme now tied to the stolen jewel. But the torn silk fabric and Reverend Clement's nervous behavior hint at a deeper conspiracy. Miss Marple, sipping tea at Danemead, spreads her notes across the table, her knitting needles idle for once. She's convinced the answer lies not just in London's shadows, but in the village. Itself, someone local is entangled with Drake. Today, she weaved through the village's threads to find the connection. Her first stop is the church, where the Sunday service preparations are in full swing. The flower arrangers are bustling, and Miss Marple joins them, offering to help with the altar display. As she trims stems, she chats with Mrs. Clements, the vicar's wife, whose pallor hasn't improved. "Ah, such a strain, this tragedy, miss," Marple says gently. "Your husband must be burdened, counseling so many." Mrs. Clements nods, her hands trembling as she arranges lilies. "He's been distracted ever since." "Well, he knew Lady Evelyn from London, you see. Church work. Long ago." Miss Marple's heart skips. "London again. Oh, did they stay in touch?" she asks, casual as ever. Mrs. Clements hesitates. "Letters sometimes. He burned one recently, said it was private. Burned letters. Like the ones Evelyn destroyed?" Miss Marple files this, away her suspicions about the vicar growing. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Connections from the past, like Clements and Evelyn's, are often the key to unraveling motives. In your own mysteries, say, a family feud, ask about old ties, school friends, former colleagues, shared events. People don't mention casual history unless it matters. Another tip. Watch for what's destroyed. Burned letters, deleted texts, shredded papers, they scream guilt or fear. If you're investigating, check trash bins or digital recycle bins for clues. Next. Miss Marple visits the village library, where Miss Knight, the librarian, is cataloging books. The library is quiet, its shelves heavy with dusty tomes, and the faint scent of ink. Miss Marple, browsing gardening books as a pretext, brings up the stranger in the black car. "You mentioned a city man near the station," she says. "Did he ever come here, perhaps looking for records?" Miss Knight's eyes light up with the thrill of gossip. "Funny you ask. He did last week. Wanted old newspapers, articles. About jewelry thefts in London, 5 years back. Said he was a historian, but he looked more like a rogue to me. Victor Drake, researching his own crimes." Evelyn's. Miss Marple borrows a book on roses, noting that Drake was digging into the past, perhaps to tighten his blackmail grip. Back at home, she receives a call from Inspector Slack, his voice gruff but excited. "Your man Drake's a slippery one. London police say he's been dodging them for years. Fenced a sapphire necklace in 47, never caught. Spotted in St. Mary Mead last Tuesday, per train records." Miss Marple nods, sharing Mrs. Weatherby's tip about the pawnshop parcel. "Check the contents," she suggests. "Might be another jewel or a decoy." Slack promises to follow up, and she senses he's starting to trust her instincts. Now, another tip. When tracking someone like Drake, follow the money or the goods. In real life, if you suspect someone's hiding dealings like a shady coworker, check their transactions. Venmo, eBay sales, even cash withdrawals. Drake's parcel suggests he was moving stolen goods. But why kill Evelyn before securing the brooch? Miss Marple ponders this as she heads to the Blue Boar, where Mr. Higgs, the landlord, is sweeping the floor. "Mr. Higgs," she says, "that city man you saw, did he meet anyone here? A local, perhaps?" Higgs scratches his head. "Come to think of it, he spoke to Dr. Haydock one evening in the corner, all hushed-like. Looked tense. Haydock again." Miss Marple's mind whirls. Was the doctor Drake's accomplice, or another victim of his schemes? She decides to test this at Dr. Haydock's surgery, arriving under the guise of picking up a prescription for Dolly. The waiting room is empty, and Haydock greets her with a strained smile. "Still no pain in that knee, Miss Marple?" he asks, but she steers the conversation. "I hear you met a Londoner at the Blue Boar recently. A friend of Evelyn's, perhaps." His face hardens. Just a patient passing through, asking directions. But his fingers tap nervously on the desk, near that locked drawer. Miss Marple thanks him and leaves, convinced he's hiding something, perhaps a connection to Drake or the HEIs. As evening falls, she meets Dolly at Gossington Hall for a quiet supper. Over shepherd's pie, Dolly shares a new tidbit. Colonel Bantry admitted to seeing Drake near Rose Cottage a week ago, arguing with Evelyn about debts. "Arthur swears it was just business," Dolly says, worried. "But he's been so secretive lately." Miss Marple nods, recalling the Colonel's financial woes. Could he have worked with Drake to steal the brooch, only for things to turn deadly? She advises Dolly to check the Colonel's study for any letters or receipts discreetly. Of course, here's another tip. When suspects overlap, like Haydock and the Colonel with Drake, map their interactions. In your own mystery, say, a workplace clique list, who talks to whom, when, and about what. Patterns emerge, like roots under soil. Miss Marple's mental map now links Drake to Evelyn, Clements, Haydock, and possibly the Colonel, with the brooch in letters as the threads. Later, at Danemead, she examines the silk fabric clue again, borrowed from Slack, with a promise to return it. It's pale blue, fine quality, like something from a woman's dress or a man's tie. She recalls seeing Dr. Haydock wear a blue silk tie last week. Mrs. Clements mentioned her husband favoring similar ones for sermons. A visit to the tailor's shop tomorrow might confirm its source. She also considers the promise to R.C. In Evelyn's diary, was it a debt, a vow, or something criminal? Clement's burned letter suggests he's hiding more than pastoral guilt as she knits by the fire. A new thought strikes. What if Drake wasn't the killer, but a catalyst? Someone local jealous, desperate, or vengeful could have used his presence to frame him, striking Evelyn down in the garden. She recalls a case from her youth, a murder pinned on an outsider, when the real culprit was a neighbor. The silk. The letters, the broochal, could be misdirection. A knock interrupts her reverie. It's Constable Pock, looking sheepish. Miss Marple, we found something else in the garden, a cigarette case. Silver, engraved with VD hidden in the rose mulch. V to Victor Drake. She thanks Pauk, her mind racing. The case, like the key, was left behind carelessness. Or a plant. She'll check it tomorrow. But for now, she feels the web tightening. The village is a maze of motives, and Drake's shadow is only one thread. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she traces the silk fabric and the cigarette case, unraveling who wove this deadly trap among the roses. Chapter 7. The silk and the cigarette case. The sun peeks through scattered clouds over St. Mary Mead, casting a golden glow on the village's thatched roofs, but Miss Marple's focus is sharper than ever. The silver cigarette case, engraved with VD, and the pale blue silk fabric are fresh thorns in this tangled mystery. Victor Drake's presence ties to the blackmail and the brooch, but the idea that a local, perhaps Dr. Haydock, Reverend Clements, or even Colonel Bantry might be his accomplice keeps her awake. Today, she plans to trace the silk's origin and examine the cigarette case, hoping to unravel whether Drake was the killer or a convenient scapegoat. With her knitting basket and a small notebook, she steps out, ready to prune the lies sprouting. In the village, her first stop is the tailor's shop, a narrow storefront where Mr. Grayson, a meticulous man with a tape measure draped around his neck, mends suits and dresses. Miss Marple, carrying the silk fragment wrapped in tissue, greets him with a smile. "Good morning, Mr. Grayson. I found this scrap in my garden, perhaps, from a dress or tie." "You're the expert." Grayson peers through his spectacles, turning. The fabric over, fine silk, imported, pale blue. "I've used it for 2 clients recently. Dr. Haydock for a tie he wears often, and Mrs. Bantry for a scarf she wanted for the fete." Miss Marple's pulse quickens. Haydock again, and Dolly. She thanks Grayson, mentioning a fictional tear in her shawl to keep the visit casual, but her mind is racing. The silk could implicate the doctor or point to Dolly, though that seems unlikely. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Physical clues like fabric require context. In your own mysteries, say, a stain on a coworker's jacket, check where it came from. Ask vendors, check receipts, or note who wears what, but don't assume guilt. A scarf or tie can be borrowed or planted. Miss Marple tucks the silk away, wondering if Haydock's tie was torn during a struggle, left to mislead. Next, she heads to the police station, a small brick building where Inspector Slack is sorting reports. She's brought the cigarette case, handed over by Constable. "Poke last night." "Inspector," she says, setting it on his desk. "This VD case, Victor Drake's, no doubt. Have you examined it?" Slack, less dismissive than usual, opens it. Inside are a few galooses, stubs, and a tiny slip of paper with RC. 11 p.m. scrawled in pencil. "Are Sir Reverend Clements?" Slack mutters. Miss Marple nods. "Possibly. Or a meeting time, just before the murder." She suggests dusting it for prints, knowing Drake's would confirm his presence. But whose? Else Slack agrees, promising results by tomorrow. As she leaves, she wonders if the case was dropped accidentally or placed to frame Drake. Another tip: small notes like that slip are gold if you decode them. In real life, a post-it with initials or times might point to a meeting or deal. Cross-check. With schedules, calendars, emails, or even social media posts. Miss Marple's betting RC is Clements, but she needs more. She visits the vicarage next, catching Reverend Clements as he tends his modest garden. He's weeding, his sleeves rolled up, but his hands shake slightly. "Reverend," she says, offering a cutting from her. "Roses, I found a note mentioning RC in connection with a late-night meeting. Any thoughts?" Clements pales, dropping his trowel. I often meet parishioners late for counseling. Nothing unusual." But his voice wavers, and Miss Marple notices he's wearing a plain cotton tie today, not silk. She shifts to talk of roses, easing his nerves, but spots a small burn mark on his cuff, perhaps from burning letters. She leaves, convinced he's hiding a link to Drake. Midday brings her to Gossington Hall, where Dolly is flustered, sorting charity donations. Miss Marple mentions the silk, asking about Dolly's scarf. "Oh, that old thing. Lost it weeks ago at the fete," Dolly says, frowning. "Why?" Miss Marple waves it off as a gardening mishap, but notes the timing lost before the murder. Could someone have taken it to plant as evidence? She asks Dolly about the Colonel's recent behavior. "Arthur's been jumpy," Dolly admits. "Found him burning papers in his study last night. Said they were old bills." "Burning papers like Clements?" Miss Marple suggests Dolly keep an eye on him, gently. Here's another tip. When people destroy evidence like papers or texts, it's a red flag. In your own sleuthing, say, a missing project file check what's been deleted or shredded. Digital tools like recovery software or even asking a witness can help. Miss Marple's seeing a pattern of concealment in the village. Later, she stops. By the Blue Boar, where Mr. Higgs is wiping tables. "Mr. Higgs?" she asks. "That London man, did he carry a cigarette case? Silver, perhaps?" Higgs nods. "I saw him flick it open, flashy-like. Left it on the table once, but Dr. Haydock picked it up, handed it back." Haydock, again, touching Drake's case? Phew. Miss Marple's suspicions deepen. She buys a lemonade, mulling over the doctor's locked drawer in tense demeanor. As evening settles, she meets Slack again, who's received a report from London. Drake's. Prints are on the cigarette case, but so are Haydock's. He claims he only touched it at the pub, Slack says, skeptical. Miss Marple suggests checking Haydock's tie for missing fabric and Clement's desk for burned paper traces. Now, a reluctant ally agrees to search both tomorrow. She also mentions the pawn shop parcel, urging him to trace its contents, possibly another jewel Drake fenced. Back at Danemead, Miss Marple sits by her fire, knitting a new row on her shawl. The silk points to Haydock or Dolly's scarf. The cigarette case ties Drake to Haydock and possibly Clements, and the burning paper suggests a cover-up. She recalls a case from her friend Sir Henry, a doctor who framed a thief to hide his own crimes. Could Haydock be using Drake as a scapegoat? Or is Clements, with his London past, the true mastermind? The RC. Note suggests a meeting, but was it with Evelyn or someone else? A final tip. When clues point to multiple suspects, test their alibis against physical evidence. In your mysteries, say a stolen item, match fingerprints, timestamps, or witnesses, to narrow the field. Miss Marple's doing this, weighing the silken case against each suspect's story. A knock at the door brings young Betty from the school, who delivers eggs weekly. "Miss Marple," she whispers. "I saw Dr. Haydock near Rose Cottage the night before it happened. Tossing something into the roses. Thought it was rubbish, but it glinted like silver." Miss Marple thanks her with a penny, her mind racing. Was Haydock planting the cigarette case? As she retires, the village clock chimes midnight. The silk and the cigarette case are weaving a tighter net, but the true killer remains hidden among the thorns. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she digs into Haydock's and Clement's secrets, chasing the glint of truth in this deadly garden. Chapter 8. Pruning the lies, the morning light filters through St. Mary Mead's mist, giving the village a dreamy glow, but Miss Marple's mind is as clear as cut glass. The pale blue silk, the cigarette case with Victor Drake's initials, and the burned papers point to a conspiracy weaving through the village, with Dr. Haydock and Reverend Clemens at its heart. Betty's tip about Haydock tossing something glinting into the rose, possibly the cigarette. Kai suggests he's more than a bystander. Miss Marple, sipping her morning tea, decides today is for confronting these threads directly. With her knitting basket and a steely resolve, she sets out to trim the lies, like deadheading roses, to reveal the healthy blooms beneath. Her first stop is Dr. Haydock's surgery, where the morning rush of patients hasn't yet begun. She knocks, claiming a need to discuss a charity matter for the church. Haydock, looking weary, lets her in, his desk cluttered with medical charts. Miss Marple wastes no time, her voice gentle but firm. "Doctor, I understand you handled a silver cigarette case at the Blue Boar recently, and young Betty saw you near Rose Cottage tossing something into the roses. Care to explain?" Haydock's face drains of color, his hand inching toward that locked drawer. I don't know what you mean, Miss Marple. I only returned a lost item to that London fellow." But his stammer betrays him, and she presses. "Further, and your silk tie blue, like the scrap found on a thorn, it's missing a piece, isn't it?" He stands abruptly, muttering about a patient, but she notices his tie today is plain cotton. She leaves, certain he's hiding a role in the murder or its cover-up. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Confrontation done gently can crack a suspect's facade. In your own mysteries, say a friend dodging questions about a broken promise, ask pointed but polite questions. Watch for physical tells, a flushed face, a quick glance away. Haydock's reaction screams guilt, but Miss Marple knows to verify before accusing. Next, she heads to the vicarage, where Reverend Clemens is preparing his sermon. The air smells of wax polish and old hymnals. She finds him in the parlor, his glasses fogged with nervous sweat. "Reverend," she says, offering a jar of her homemade jam as a pretext. "That note in the cigarette case, RC 11 p.m., it's curious, don't you think? And your wife mentioned you burned a letter recently." Clements drops his pen, his hands trembling. "I counsel many people, Miss Marple. Letters are private, and that note, it could mean anything." But his eyes dart to the locked drawer in his study, the same one she noticed before. She chats about jam recipes to ease the tension, but spots a trace of ash on his desk fresh, as if from recent burning. She leaves, convinced he's linked to Drake, perhaps through those London days. Another tip: physical traces like ash or deleted files are clues to concealment. In your investigation, say, a missing report at work check for signs of destruction, emptied bins, cleared browser history. Ask who had access and when. Miss Marple's noting Clement's ash in Haydock's drawer as pieces of the puzzle. Midday takes her to the police station, where Inspector Slack is poring over a new report. "Miss Marple," he says, almost respectfully, the pawn shop. "Parcel was a sapphire ring, fenced by Drake last week. And Haydock's prints on the cigarette case matched those on a glass at Rose Cottage." A glass. Miss Marple's mind races. Haydock was inside the cottage, not just the garden. She shares Betty's sighting, urging Slack to search Haydock's surgery for the missing silk tie and Clement's study for burned letter fragments. "And check the glass for traces of Evelyn's sleeping pills," she adds. Slack nods, scribbling notes, and promises a search warrant by afternoon. Back in the village, Miss Marple visits the school, where Betty is sweeping the steps. "Betty, dear," she says, offering a sweet, "that glinting object you saw Dr. Haydock tossed, did it look like a cigarette case?" Betty nods eagerly, shiny silver, with a fancy letter on it. He threw it hard like he was angry. Confirms Haydock planted the case, perhaps to frame Drake. Miss Marple thanks her, adding a tip. Always trust children's observations. They see without prejudice. In your own mysteries, ask kids or bystanders. Their honesty cuts through adult lies. At Gossington Hall, Dolly is frantic, having searched Colonel Bantry's study. Jane, I found this. She holds up a singed receipt dated last week for a payment to a London jeweler. Arthur said it was for a gift, but he's been so cagey. Miss Marple examines it, noting the jeweler's address near the pawnshop Drake used. Was the Colonel fencing jewels too, or paying off a debt to Drake? She advises Dolly to keep it safe, suggesting the Colonel might have been blackmailed, like Evelyn. Here's another tip. Financial records, like that receipt, are a trail to motive. In your own sleuthing, say, a suspicious expense check bank, statements, receipts, or even Venmo notes. Look for odd payments or names that don't fit. The Colonel's receipt suggests a deeper tie to Drake's schemes as evening falls. Miss Marple stops by the Blue Boar, where Mr. Higgs is serving locals. She asks about Haydock's meeting with Drake. Anything unusual, Mr. Higgs? Raised voices, perhaps? He leans in, lowering his voice. They argued quiet-like about money. Drake said something about settling accounts before leaving. Settling accounts, blackmail, or betrayal. Miss Marple buys a ginger beer. Her thoughts on Haydock's role. Is he Drake's partner, turned killer to silence Evelyn? Back at Dane Mead, she spreads her notes, knitting as she thinks. The silk ties to Haydock's tie. The cigarette case was planted by him. And Clement's burned papers mirror Evelyn's. The Colonel's receipt adds another thread. Perhaps he was complicit. She recalls a case from her friend Sir Henry A. Local framing an outsider to hide a personal grudge, Haydock's access to pills, Clement's London past, and the Colonel's money troubles all fit, but the glass at Rose Cottage nags her. Were Evelyn's pills tampered with before the strangling? A knock brings Slack, looking grim. Searched Haydock's surgery, found a torn blue silk tie in his drawer, matches the thorn scrap. Clement's desk had ash letter fragments, with justice written on them. Miss Marple nods, her suspicions confirmed. Test the glass, Inspector. Question Haydock about that ring. Slack agrees, impressed by her tenacity. One last tip when evidence piles up like the tie. An ash, build a narrative. In your mysteries, say, a workplace theft pieced together clues into a story. Who had access, motive, and opportunity? Miss Marple's story points to Haydock planting clues to frame Drake, but Clement's role remains murky as she retires. The village is quiet, but the air hums with secrets. The lies are being pruned, but the root of the murder, Drake, Haydock, or Clement's, remains buried. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she digs into the glass and the pills, closing in on the killer among the roses. Chapter 9. The poisoned petals. The air in St. Mary Mead carries a crisp edge this morning, hinting at autumn's approach, but Miss Marple's focus is on the heat of the mystery. The torn blue silk tie in Dr. Haydock's drawer, the burned letter, fragments in Reverend Clement's study. The glass at Rose Cottage with Haydock's fingerprints are weaving a tighter net. The possibility that Evelyn's sleeping pills were Tampacaptor 8, pruning the lies. The morning light filters through St. Mary Mead's mist, giving the village a dreamy glow, but Miss Marple's mind is as clear as cut glass. The pale blue silk, the cigarette case with Victor Drake's initials, and the burned papers point to a conspiracy weaving through the village, with Dr. Haydock and Reverend Clements at its heart. Betty's tip about Haydock tossing something glinting into the rose is possibly the cigarette. I suggest he's more than a bystander. Miss Marple, sipping her morning tea, decides today is for confronting these threads directly with her knitting basket and a steely resolve. She sets out to trim the lies like deadheading roses to reveal the healthy blooms beneath. Her first stop is Dr. Haydock's surgery, where the morning rush of patients hasn't yet begun. She knocks, claiming a need to discuss a charity matter for the church. Haydock, looking weary, lets her in, his desk cluttered with medical charts. Miss Marple wastes no time, her voice gentle but firm. Doctor, I understand you handled a silver cigarette case at the Blue Boar recently, and young Betty saw you near Rose Cottage, tossing something into the roses. Care to explain? Haydock's face drains of color, his hand inching toward that locked drawer. I don't know what you mean, Miss Marple. I only returned a lost item to that London fellow. But his stammer betrays him, and she presses. Further, and your silk tie blue, like the scrap found on a thorn? It's missing a piece, isn't it? He stands abruptly, muttering about a patient, but she notices his tie today is plain cotton. She leaves. Certain he's hiding a role in the murder war, its cover-up. Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. Confrontation done gently can crack a suspect's facade. In your own mystery, say, a friend dodging questions about a broken promise. Pointed but polite questions. Watch for physical tells. A flushed face. A quick glance away. Haydock's reaction screams guilt, but Miss Marple knows to verify before accusing. Next, she heads to the vicarage, where Reverend Clements is preparing his sermon. The air smells of wax polish and old hymnals. She finds him in the parlor, his glasses fogged with nervous sweat. Reverend, she says, offering a jar of her homemade jam as a pretext. That note in the cigarette case? RC 11 p.m. It's curious, don't you think? And your wife mentioned you burned a letter recently. Clemens drops his pen, his hands trembling. I counsel many people, Miss Marple. Letters are private, and that note, it could mean anything. But his eyes dart to the locked drawer in his study, the same one she noticed before. She chats about jam recipes. To ease the tension but spots a trace of ash on his desk fresh, as if from recent burning. She leaves, convinced he's linked to Drake, perhaps through those London days. Midday takes her to the police station, where Inspector Slack is poring over a new report. Miss Marple, he says, almost respectfully, the pawnshop parcel. Was a sapphire ring fenced by Drake last week? Haydock's prints on the cigarette case match those on a glass at Rose Cottage? A glass? Miss Marple's mind reses Haydock was inside the cottage, not just the garden. She shares Betty's sighting, urging Slack to search Haydock's surgery for the missing silk tie and Clement's study for burned letter fragments. And check the glass for traces of Evelyn's sleeping pills, she adds. Slack nods, scribbling notes and promises a search warrant by afternoon. Back in the village, Miss Marple visits the school where Betty is sweeping the steps. Betty, dear, she says, offering a sweet, that glinting object you saw Dr. Haydock tossed, did it look like a cigarette case? Betty nods, eagerly. Shiny, silver, with a fancy letter on it. He threw it hard, like he was angry. Confirms Haydock planted the case, perhaps to frame Drake. Miss Marple thanks her, adding a tip. Always trust children's observations they see without prejudice. In your own mysteries, ask kids or bystanders. Their honesty cuts through adult lies. At Gossington Hall, Dolly is frantic, having searched Colonel Bantry's study. Jane, I found this. She holds up a singed receipt dated last week. 4. A payment to a London jeweler. Arthur said it was for a gift, but he's been so cagey. Miss Marple examines it, noting the jeweler's address near the pawnshop Drake used. Was the Colonel fencing jewels too, or paying off a debt to Drake? She advises Dolly to keep it safe, suggesting the Colonel might have been blackmailed. Like Evelyn, here's another tip. Financial records like that receipt are a trail to motive. In your own sleuthing, say, a suspicious expense check bank. Statements, receipts, or even Venmo notes. Look for odd payments or names that don't fit. The Colonel's receipt suggests a deeper tie to Drake's schemes as evening falls. Miss Marple stops by the Blue Boar, where Mr. Higgs is serving locals. She asks about Haydock's meeting with Drake. Anything unusual, Mr. Higgs? Raised voices, perhaps? He leans in, lowering his voice. They argued, quiet-like, about money. Drake said something about settling accounts before leaving. Settling accounts, blackmail or betrayal. Miss Marple buys a ginger beer. Her thoughts on Haydock's role. Was he, Drake's partner, turned killer, to silence Evelyn? Back at Danemead, she spreads her notes, knitting as she thinks. The silk ties to Haydock's tie, the cigarette case was planted by him, and Clement's burned papers mirror Evelyn's. The Colonel's receipt adds another thread, perhaps he was complicit. She recalls a case from her friend Sir Henry A. Local framing an outsider to hide a personal grudge. Haydock's access to pills, Clement's London past. And the Colonel's money troubles all fit, but the glass at Rose Cottage nags her. Were Evelyn's pills tampered with before the strangling? Knock brings Slack, looking grim. Searched Haydock's surgery. Found a torn blue silk tie in his drawer, matches the thorn scrap. And Clement's desk had ash letter fragments with justice written on them. Miss Marple nods, her suspicions confirmed. Test the glass, Inspector, and question Haydock about that ring. Slack agrees, impressed by her tenacity. One last tip. When evidence piles up, like the tie and ash, build a narrative. In your mysteries, say, a workplace theft pieced together clues into a story, who had access, motive, and opportunity. Miss Marple's story points to Haydock planting clues to frame Drake, but Clement's role remains murky as she retires. The village is quiet, but the air hums with secrets. The lies are being pruned, but the root of the murder Drake, Haydock, or Clement's remains buried. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she digs into the glass and the pills, closing in on the killer among the roses. Read with before her strangling gnaws at Miss Marple, she's seen poison cases before, where a subtle dose sets the stage for a bolder crime. Today she aims to dig into the glass and the pills, hoping to unearth the final clues to catch the killer. With her knitting basket and a small vial of her own rose water for gifting, she steps out, ready to pluck the truth from this thorny plot. Her first stop is the police station, where Inspector Slack is sipping coffee, his desk littered with reports. Miss Marple, he says. Nodding, the glass from Rose Cottage had traces of Evelyn's sleeping pills barbiturates, far more than her prescription dose. Could have knocked her out cold. Miss Marple's eyes narrow. Enough. To make strangling easier, Inspector? Slack nods grimly. Likely no signs of a struggle, remember? She urges him to check Haydock's surgery for barbiturate records and to question Clements about those burned fragments, especially the word justice. Slack, now a firm ally, agrees to summon both men for questioning today. She leaves. She wonders, was Haydock drugging Evelyn to silence her, or was Clement's moralistic streak a motive for murder? Let's pause for a sleuthing tip. When dealing with substances like pills, verify the source and quantity. In your own mysteries, say a suspicious drink at a party check, who had access to it and what they could have added. Medical records, purchase histories, or even a bartender's memory can help. Ms. Marple's betting Haydock's access to drugs makes him key, but she needs proof next. She visits the chemist shop, where Mr. Brooks, a bespectacled man with a ledger fetish, dispenses prescriptions. Under the guise of buying rose water, she asks about Evelyn's pills. Did Dr. Haydock ever adjust her dose, Mr. Brooks, or mention anything unusual? Brooks checks his records, frowning. Odd thing. He ordered extra barbiturates last. Mump said it was for a patient with severe insomnia, but Evelyn's dose never changed. Extra pills? Miss Marple thanks him, her mind racing. Haydock could have stockpiled drugs to overdose Evelyn, ensuring she was unconscious before the twine tightened. She heads to the vicarage next, catching Mrs. Clements in the garden, pruning roses. Mrs. Clements, Miss Marple says, offering her rosewater vial. Your husband's been so quiet lately. Did he ever counsel Lady Evelyn about her troubles? Perhaps something weighing on her conscience? Mrs. Clements hesitates, her shears pausing. He did once or twice. She confessed something about her past sins. She called them. He wrote it down, said it was for prayer, but burned it later. Said it was too heavy a burden. Miss Marple nods, her suspicions deepening. Clements knew Evelyn's secrets enough. To write those justice letters, she leaves, spotting a faint ink stain on Mrs. Clements' apron. It's like the ones on her husband's fingers. Midday brings her to Rose Cottage, where Dolly is helping clear out Evelyn's remaining belongings. Miss Marple asks to see the kitchen, where the glass was found. It's a delicate tumbler, out of place among Evelyn's fine crystal, with a faint powdery residue inside.
Hi, Dolly, she says.
Did Evelyn drink anything unusual that night? Dolly shakes her head. Only tea, usually. But this glass was on the counter, half empty, when I arrived after, you know. Miss Marple wraps the glass in a cloth, planning to show Slack. The powder suggests the pills were dissolved, likely by someone Evelyn trusted like Haydock, who visited often. Here's another tip. Trust is a weak spot. In your mystery, say, a tampered lunch at work, consider who the victim let close. Friends, family, or colleagues with access are prime suspects. Evelyn's glass points to someone she invited in, not a stranger like Drake. Later, at the Blue Boar, Miss Marple chats with Mr. Higgs over a lemonade. Did Dr. Haydock ever mention Lady Evelyn's health, or meet her here? Higgs scratches his chin. Saw them together once last month. He was giving her a bottle set. It was tonic for her nerves. She looked uneasy, didn't drink it. A tonic, or a cover for the pills? Miss Marple's mind whirls. Haydock had opportunity and means, but what was his motive? Blackmail gone? Wrong, or fear of exposure? As evening falls, she meets Slack at the station, where he's interrogating Haydock and Clements. Haydock, sweating, insists he only prescribed Evelyn's usual dose, and the tonic was harmless. Clements, clutching his Bible, claims his burned papers were sermon notes, not letters. But Slack reveals a bombshell, the letter fragments. From Clements' desk match the justice note's handwriting, and Haydock's surgery has a vial of barbiturates missing. Miss Marple, observing quietly, suggests testing the vial's contents against the glass residue. Slack agrees, sending both men home under watch. Back at Danemead, she knits by the fire, piecing the puzzle. Haydock's pills, his tie, his prints, on the glass, and his meeting with Drake scream guilt, but Clement's letters and London past suggest he's no innocent. She recalls a case from her youth, a vicar who poisoned a sinner to cleanse their soul. Could Clements have drugged Evelyn, believing it justice for her crimes, then framed Drake? Or was Haydock the mastermind, using the vicar's zeal to cover his tracks? One last tip. When motives overlap, like Haydock's greed and Clement's morality, test their actions against the crime's method. In your mysteries, say, a sabotage project check, who benefits, and how they acted. Haydock's drugs and Clement's letters both fit the murder's setup. A knock brings Dolly, breathless. Jane Arthur confessed. He paid Drake to keep. Quiet about a loan, but swears he didn't kill Evelyn? Miss Marple nods, ruling out the colonel, but focusing on the others. The glass, the pills, and the letters are blooming into a clear picture. But one thorn remains. The petals are falling, and the killer's mask is slipping. Next, we'll follow Miss Marple as she confronts Haydock and Clements, unearthing the final truth in this deadly rose garden. Chapter 10. The rose revealed the sky over St. Mary Mead is a soft pink as dawn breaks. But Miss Marple feels the weight of the mystery's final thorns. The barbiturate-laced glass, Dr. Haydock's torn silk tie, Reverend Clements' burned letters, and Victor Drake's looming presence have woven a tight web, but the killer's identity remains just out of reach. Today she vows to cut through the last lies, exposing the truth in Evelyn's murder. With her knitting basket and a plan to gather the suspects, she sips her tea, her mind as sharp as a pruning knife. The rose garden holds the final secret, and she's ready to pluck it. She begins by inviting Inspector Slack, Dr. Haydock, Reverend Clements, and Dolly Bantry to Rose Cottage for what she calls a memorial tea for Evelyn. Slack, now trusting her instincts, agrees to bring the evidence: the glass, the tie, the letter fragments, and the cigarette case. Miss Marple asks Dolly to bring Colonel Bantry to clear his name fully. The cottage's kitchen is set with a simple tea service, the air heavy with the scent of roses drifting in from the garden. As the group gathers, Miss Marple stands, her frail frame commanding attention. "We're here to honor Lady Evelyn," she says, "but also to untangle the truth. Someone in this village, perhaps in this room, took her life." She starts with the glass, holding it up. This contained barbiturates, far beyond Evelyn's prescription, dissolved to render her helpless before the twine ended her life. "Dr. Haydock, you ordered extra pills, didn't you?" Doc shifts, his face pale. "For a patient, yes, but not for her." Miss Marple nods, turning to Slack. "The residue matches a vial missing from his surgery, Inspector." She then picks up the silk tie. "This was found in your drawer, Doctor, torn like the scrap on the rose thorn. And Betty saw you toss a silver cigarette case into the garden. marked VD Victor Drake's. Haydock stammers, "I found it, returned it to him, that's all." But his hands tremble. Let's pause for a final sleuthing tip. When cornering a suspect, lay out the evidence piece by piece, like arranging roses in a vase. In your own mysteries, say, confronting a dishonest friend, present facts calmly. Watching their reactions, denials crack under pressure. Miss Marple's doing this now, her eyes missing nothing. She turns to Clemens, holding up a burned fragment. "Reverend, your handwriting matches the anonymous letter sent to Evelyn. Thorns of justice. You knew her from London, didn't you? Her confessions about past sins, jewelry thefts, perhaps?" Clemens clutches his teacup, his voice low. "She confessed to stealing, yes. I urged her to repent, but those letters, I wrote to warn her, not threaten." Miss Marple nods. "Yet you burned them, hiding your role. Why?" Clemens looks down, silent. She then addresses the colonel, who's sweating beside Dolly. "Colonel Bantry, you paid Victor Drake to keep quiet about a loan tied to a jeweler near his pawn shop. But you didn't kill Evelyn, did you?" He shakes his head, relieved. "No, I swear. I was at the Blue Boar, drowning my debts." Dolly squeezes his hand, and Miss Marple smiles, ruling him out. Now she paces, knitting needles clicking in. Her basket. Victor Drake blackmailed Evelyn over her past thefts, demanding the rose brooch. She hid it in the garden, planning to meet him at midnight to end his threats. But someone else was there, someone who drugged her tea, strangled her with twine, and planted Drake's cigarette case to frame him. She pauses, eyeing Haydock and Clemens. "Dr. Haydock, you were seen with Evelyn, giving her a tonic laced with barbiturates, I believe. Your tie was torn in the struggle, and you tossed the cigarette case to point to Drake." Haydock stands, furious. "This is absurd. I cared for her." Miss Marple turns to Clemens. "Reverend, you knew Evelyn's sins and wrote those letters, believing her death was justice. But did you act on it?" Clemens breaks, tears streaming. "I didn't kill her. I met Drake that night, 11 p.m., to beg him to leave her alone. He laughed, said she'd pay or die. I left, but I should have stayed." His confession hangs heavy, and Miss Marple nods, her gaze returning to Haydock. "Doctor," she says softly, "you were Evelyn's lover in London, weren't you? Part of the theft ring, until she betrayed you, keeping the brooch. You followed her here, posed as her physician, and when Drake's blackmail threatened to expose you both, you acted. You drugged her tea, strangled her in the garden, and planted the case to blame Drake." Haydock's face twists. "Can't prove it." But Slack steps forward, holding a report. "The vial from your surgery matches the glass residue, and your tie's fibers are identical to the thorn scrap." Haydock collapses into a chair, head in hands. "She ruined me in London, kept the brooch, left me with nothing. When Drake came, demanding it, I couldn't let her talk. I slipped. The pills in her tea waited till she was out then. Twine. The room is silent, Dolly gasping, Clemens praying. Slack cuffs Haydock, nodding to Miss Marple. "You've done it again, ma'am." As the group disperses, Miss Marple lingers. In the garden, touching a black baccara. "Poor Evelyn," she murmurs. "Caught in thorns she couldn't escape." She returns to Danemead, her shawl finished, the mystery solved. The roses will bloom again, but for now, justice has taken root. That's the end of our tale, folks. If you enjoyed unraveling this mystery with Miss Marple, give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more, and drop a comment. Who did you suspect? Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next adventure. Her mind is sharp as a pruning knife. The rose garden holds the final secret, and she's ready to pluck it.